Today we're going to play around with this Logitech G710 Plus. This is quite a popular keyboard mainly because it's from Logitech and therefore it's widely available in many countries. So basically I took this board in as used and as a non-functional unit. So I just wanted to see what I could do with it, and at the very least I can have it for parts and get to know this keyboard in particular. I'll also change some things up to see how it looks, so I'll do just a little bit of a paint job. I actually quite like the color scheme besides that hideous glossy black finish, and as most of you know, I pretty much don't like any glossy black finish on surfaces that you often touch, since it just gets dirty so easily. The outer plastic shell, which is most of the shell, is a really nice kind of like dark grey silvery type of color, but it doesn't really look that metallic. So I'll keep that on there since it also does have labels and stuff printed on it. First things first is to take out all the keycaps. I like to just worry about these later, so I fill up a bucket with soapy water and just chuck them all in there and leave them in there for a while. Since these are cherry style stabilizers, these don't have the metal wires connected to them, so it's fine to just put them in the water. But if they did have the metal wires, don't mix them in since they will make the keycaps bubble depending on what type of caps you have. For the outer plastic shell, you can use any sort of soft degreaser or alcohol to clean it. I'm using methylated spirits, which can damage the finish on the plastic if it has some sort of coating, but this is all depending on what the finish is. Something like this simple green is pretty good and won't damage anything, but for this I'll just use methylated spirits since it's just straight plastic. Now we can see just how dirty this thing is, and it's going to take quite a bit of work to get this clean again. For any loose pieces, just turning it over and tapping the keyboard will get rid of those bits. And then since there's quite a lot of debris, I'm going to try to use a vacuum. Now I've done a lot of reading on whether it's suitable to use a vacuum on a keyboard, and I would really love to know if you guys know anything on the topic. But the basic gist of it is that you can't vacuum something like a PC, since the vacuum will create static buildup and in turn will discharge into sensitive electronics and therefore killing some components. However, when it comes to keyboards, it's generally said that since it has such low voltages, and it's just fine to vacuum. But again, I'm no expert on this and I don't know what I'm talking about, and I would just love to hear a definitive answer because all I've seen has been mixed. Anyways, it is on the top side if that makes any difference. To help suck up bits that are more stuck, using some tweezers really helps out, but you won't be able to get everything out since there's these little gaps at the bottom of the key switches, which is really annoying. Now I'll take it apart, which will make it more easier to clean, and it's a pretty easy task of taking a few Phillips head screws out of the bottom of the keyboard and then prying the top shell off by taking off the plastic tabs as per usual. This does require a bit of force to take off since the clips in the middle of the keyboard are really tight. Alright, so now that the shells are apart, I'll put them in some warm soapy water for a while to help clean them up, so I can deal with the other parts for now. And this is probably the most grueling step in this whole process, especially with these boards that have a bit of residue, which makes the debris stick to the metal backplate more. Luckily for me, this metal backplate is a smooth matte finish, so it's easier to make it look cleaner in comparison to the glossy ones, and stuff doesn't stick to this like it does on the rough powder coated finishes. So this part is all about repetition. I'll be using cotton buds or Q-tips, and we'll apply a bit of this simple green liquid, which again is a cleaner or degreaser. You can also use whatever other liquid you want. But the main thing with this is not to use too much liquid since it can seep through the gaps and potentially damage the electronics. I just want to clean the surface, and as said, this is all about repetition and just making pass after pass until I'm happy enough. This isn't going to a client, so I'm not too fussed on getting this really clean. So after all those many passes, it's quite clean, well, a ton cleaner than how it was before. There's still a bit of dust on these, but this is just my fault because I just leave it out in my workshop and the dust just falls on it. Now that's done, I'll see what I can do with the keyboard itself, and as I said earlier, this isn't a functioning unit, so the Z, X, C and V keys don't work but they still light up, and then there's a ton of LEDs that don't turn on. I installed the software just in case, but they still don't turn on, and I really don't know enough on electronic repair to even diagnose the problem, which I really should have someone that can do so. And for the key switches, the best I can do is desolder the key switch and then put a new one in and test it. And as I thought, the key switch didn't register anything, so that was quite disappointing, but that's fine. I'll just keep the parts until I have a guy that knows this stuff and can do something with it. So that was quite disappointing, but I didn't want to waste all this time and footage, so here's the plastic shells and I'll paint it to make it a display item for the meantime, and I guess help out anyone who would want to do the same thing. So as I said before, the top shell comes apart in three main parts. We have the main shell, which is the grey plastic, and then we have the orange and glossy black bits. These are held in with clips and are then secured even more by these metal plastic prongs, which are essentially plastic rivets. Therefore, these are one way, so the only way to free these parts is to break off the tops of the prongs. I'm going to be using a flat blade, which makes it super easy to cut off, but you can also try using a sharp flathead screw bit. After that's done, it's pretty easy to free some plastic clips and just push the parts out. Now for the painting. I'm not going to go too into detail on this since I already have a video on it, which you can check out. But it's pretty much just a bit of wet sanding for better adhesion, especially since these bits are glossy. And it will also help us fit these parts back in later, since paint will add thickness to the bits. Then to fill in some gaps and again promote adhesion, I'll put in some primer, but not too much since I don't want to add too much thickness. Then after more sanding, finally I spray the parts. I really like blue, but since there's already a blue version of this keyboard, I'll just make it white, which also does kind of make the board look more professional in a way. And of course after that I added some clear coat. And putting it back together is pretty easy. I'm not putting the cable back in since it will be a display item for now. And the white actually looks pretty cool, but it really does make that inside shell really pop out and is way more apparent in comparison to when it was black. So it kind of does look weird, like it's a normal plain keyboard inside a massive plastic outer shell. As for the keycaps, I know that there's heaps of people that have breakage problems with these. I'm not sure why, since these seem to be nearly identical to the Razer ones and many other keycaps in terms of thickness, but it may just be the plastic mix that they use. So I'll keep these, and maybe I'll be able to provide some of these keycaps to people who have broken theirs. So yeah, sorry about not having a conclusive video, but I just got too far into it to back out. But I guess it's also cool to have a keyboard with these key switches exposed as a nice display piece. Again, I'd love to hear anything on vacuuming keyboards since I didn't have any compressed air on me at the time.